Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 30 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates, and hopefully I'll be able to keep these going pretty steadily. I missed a few weeks there along the way, just life got really busy. But I've got my friend Tom MacCormick here today, and I've actually been a guest on Tom's podcast a while back, and Tom himself is a very successful coach. He's out of London in the UK, across the pond, I like to say. And so Tom is one of those people that I've been trying to get on here for a while. I've got this grand list of great people in the industry, and then slowly, piece by piece, I'm able to check them off and introduce these people to you. And we don't always get as much exposure to a lot of the greats in the United Kingdom and, literally across the ocean as we sometimes do with some of our North American contemporaries. So it's great to have you here. And I guess a little bit about you so that I cut you off, so that people know you're not just a guy who's jacked and shredded and helps, guys get lean and put on muscle. You've got the education to back it up. You got a Bachelor of Sports Science, you've got a Master's of Strength and Conditioning. You're a fitness writer. You and I share Team Nation. You're also on Breaking Muscle, and your podcast is the Breaking Muscle podcast. So you got a big footprint in our industry. So it's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate being on this. It's an honor to be on. I've listened to your show. I know some of the other guests, and I'm a fan of their work. So it's nice to be on, a similar show to them, and able to sort of share some of my thoughts on things as well. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's great. So what have you been up to recently in your efforts?
Honestly, a lot of homeschooling. So over here, we were in lockdown, and the kids only went back to school this Monday. So. It's what today, depending on when this show goes live. Today is Friday. We've had 5 days with the kids back at school. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old. So up until quite recently, and for the best part of last 6 months, or 6 months worth of schooling has been done at home. So that has been an interesting thing. Dealing with that, obviously less time available for other endeavors, and then juggling, looking after my existing client base, the people I used to see in person. The gyms have been shut for a while as well, so I haven't been able to have that face-to-face contact in person, but managing them and helping them still progress, as well as my online clients, trying to get some content out there, as you say, for Breaking Muscle and Strength, T Nation, maybe even Instagram when I'm able to. So basically it's been juggling that, but I'm much better versed on the curriculum for 5 and 7-year-olds here in the UK. Put it that way.
And that raises something that we often forget about in our conversations in the industry, how much, varying lockdowns, because I know the UK has been one of the more heavy hit from fairly early on, even in still till now. I mean, in Edmonton, Alberta, we've been, almost on the other end of the spectrum where we've had lockdowns, but they've been kind of minor or short-lived compared to what's going on in, say, California or the UK. Mm-hmm. And, people who are plugged into their quote favorite fitness professionals often don't know what's changed in our personal lives. Now, me, no kids, so there's really not that factor. But anyone who does have them, talk to Pete Dupuis, he's got kids. Tony Gentilcore, him and Lisa have their little guy, Julian, and goes on down the list. So this has actually been kind of a major change, and that can impact our time, energy, our ability to do all the things that we normally would want to do. And on top of that, there's added time and effort that goes into servicing the unique needs of people in home or limited training environments versus the standardized gym format that we all will build a program and go, okay, cool. We assume we're going to have a leg press. We assume we're going to have barbells and weights and dumbbells and all these default things and a cable system. And all of a sudden you've got someone who has bands.
Yes.
Oh, it's like, shit. Do we even have video to show people? So every fitness professional knows if you've been in this situation, which I assume you have this year, it actually takes a lot more individualized creativity and effort to take care of these clients. And, there's no choice in the matter. You take care of and serve the clients, or else, you're going out of business pretty fast here, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. And well, I suppose I'm in the fortunate position in saying, weirdly, now we've been in lockdown long enough that most of my guys and girls have actually got decent equipment now. They've finally been able to get hold of some. And so now we have more variety, more tools to play with. But you're right. At the start, it was like, so I've got these bands. and I've got one adjustable dumbbell that I can get to go to like 12 pounds, and or something like that. And you had to get pretty creative back then. And we went into lockdown originally March last year, so we're March 23rd, so we're almost a year in there. We've come out and gone back in, so we have had some time back in the gym. But in many respects, it's a great learning experience. Very quickly, we all became much better at utilizing body weight and band only workouts, which I think was fantastic learning experience. I'd rather not to have had to go through it, but by the same token, it will, I think, make me a better coach, or has already made me a better coach. And I'm sure many of the listeners are feeling the same way about that. By the same token, we are due to be back in the gym on April the 12th, and I cannot wait.
Well deserved. And I'm hoping at this point, people are probably a little tired of talking about it. It's been all the memes, like this past week was literally the last normal week we had this year. We had no idea what we were facing. It was just before my birthday last year. My birthday is actually tomorrow as of time of recording. By the time of release, this will be released on the Tuesday, so would have been Saturday, so the 13th for anyone listening. And I remember sitting down with, a smaller group of my friends, because a lot of people, felt like, hey, we didn't know what's going on. They didn't come over. Had a few drinks, and I realized, like, shit, they're going to shut the gyms down. I need to get a home gym set up really fast. So I managed to scramble, pull it together. Sure enough, the gyms were announced closed on the Tuesday, and it's been a wild ride of a year. But it's also spawned some interesting things, and I don't like glossing over the negatives and the frustrating stuff. But what happened was all kinds of time and effort devoted to career that I think a lot of people really dove in and flourished this year. I know that I wrote some stuff for T Nation, like home full body dumbbell workouts. The first one was so popular, I had to write a second one because I'm talking to our editor, Chris, and it's like, how many people read this thing? And he's like, 300,000. I'm like, holy shit, right? Which is a huge number. So I'm like, all right, well, you want me to put together a second one with some new ideas? Like, sure, yeah. And that got published. And so I think anyone listening knows that despite the hardship, there's probably been a lot of good that's come out of it for anyone who said, all right, screw it. I can't go traveling. I can't go out much this year. I'm going to serve my clients, build business, do whatever I can. And I think a lot of people are going to come out the other side of this thing very versatile and stronger than ever. Unfortunately, we know that a lot of people will have left the industry, but I don't think those people are mostly the type of people who are plugged into what we're doing here, listening to a podcast like this. I think the people who are listening are the types who are resilient and made it through. And I think you're in better shape than ever.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, obviously there'll be some attrition. Some people will fall out of the industry, and that's a real shame. And some of those will be people that could have had great value. But by and large, I think you'll find the people that were not so invested in helping their clients and bettering themselves, but maybe just enjoyed being in the gym themselves, and it happened to be a convenient job, for example. Maybe they're a high proportion of those guys and girls. I would expect are the ones that have fallen by the wayside.
And I think going forward, anybody who made it through is in a really good position. And Lord knows when the gyms reopen here now, our government did something unique. A lot of people were frustrated by it. I have my pros and cons to it, but they allowed the gyms to reopen, but not the general member base to return. They allowed trainers to work one-on-one with clients. Okay. And as much as everybody lost their shit about this whole thing, and it did not help the general populace who are, struggling with their mental health, at least I know where the government was coming from in trying not, they're being overly tentative about not putting people in gyms. And my thoughts are that gyms are a net positive, and I don't think they're a major vector of spread. And I think as a whole, keeping people healthier is going to be a positive. I think most people listening would agree more or less. But what I know the government was trying to do was trying to get the gym owners back some revenue, trainers back working, so that way they at least were saving sort of the livelihood side of things. And then a couple of weeks later, they reopened them to general population under a lot of goofy restrictions. No one was allowed to do anything high intensity. You're only allowed to do low intensity weightlifting, and what the hell is even that? And
yeah,
so there's a lot of chafing and crying on social media about it. But the way I look at it too, it's like, it wasn't, this versus a free for all. It was this versus gyms not being open. So, maybe just kind of take what we've got for the moment, and pretty soon we know it'll loosen up. One of the thing I wanted to talk to you most is you and I kind of share a similar origin as those, athletic but leaner guys. You used the term that you were a skinny guy when you were younger. And I'm going to assume, much like me, we grew up on a lot of bodybuilding imagery, a lot of 80s action movie stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the muscular types before things went Robert Pattinson in Twilight, I guess is the
Yes.
and we struggled to put on muscle, I guess, early, struggled to know what to do. And you built an entire career and brand around helping guys put on muscle and get lean. I tend to work heavily in the general population. I'm a big guy. We both write for T Nation, which is a strength and bodybuilding website. But I find a lot of my social media messaging will still be, this message that helps, everyday people, general population, get into gyms, be comfortable, and then specific tools outward. So it takes something a bit more to be that, that lean guy who really wants to throw on a ton of muscle and be really lean at the same time. So what has to happen to go above and beyond just serving the general population to be really jacked, really lean at the same time?
Mm. Well, if we took from my personal experience, a lot of mistakes and a lot of persistence and then refining the process, which I suppose, in some respects, I'm very stubborn. My wife would accuse me of that, and I would probably recognize that to some extent she's right. The fact that I'm still doing this after sort of such slow progress for so long is probably a key principle or a key element in my own personal success. And then from being able to transfer that over to helping other guys do it, because I was not gifted in this respect, I had to keep learning and refining and seeing what works and experimenting on myself. And then as I train more people and connecting those dots up, and I was able then to find ways to help them. I suppose someone who had it easy doesn't have to think very deeply about these things, and they look great, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy for them to help other people look great. I think probably one of the key components that came into working for me was understanding that I'm actually specifically training to gain muscle. This may seem blindingly obvious, but one of the mistakes I made and lots of people have made is they start chasing competing goals because it's kind of cool, or their favorite person on social media does it. And it's like, no, if I want to be really good at something, like an athlete focuses specifically on their sport to get really good at it, and they are genetically gifted or talented and naturally adept at that. I'm not necessarily, so I have to be even more focused on that, not get sidetracked chasing competing goals. And then the second piece of the puzzle that, again, it seems blindingly obvious, but my nutrition, and understanding that whilst I, for a large period of time, focused on the minutiae of training program design and what's trying to create that perfect program, or the elusive perfect program, that actually training is the stimulus. It creates the potential for growth, but unless I support that with adequate recovery, through sleep and nutrition, you're not going to get the results. You're not going to get big and jacked. You can train as much as you want, to be honest, and you won't get big and jacked if you don't support it with the adequate rest and recovery and getting those strategies in place, and then understanding what that is. Whilst I'm going on this, the first bit of success I had was getting really lean, because I wasn't ripped as a kid. I was kind of skinny fat. You sort of talked about being athletic. I wouldn't say I was athletic. I wasn't a good athlete, but I was quite a good sportsman. So I was a good skill-based player, game intelligence, and I played rugby to a decent standard, but I played it from when I was 8. So I had a lot of exposure there. But I wasn't the best athlete on the pitch by any stretch of the imagination. And the first bit of success I had in training my physique was getting lean. And I was, it was that kind of lean that you see on the memes, doesn't count, like 130 pounds with abs doesn't count or whatever. But I wasn't quite that light. But first time I got shredded, I was like, oh wow, I can actually do something that changes my physique. And that little bit of I've got control, I've got ownership, it gave me the confidence that, okay, if you keep working, you can make those changes. So anyway, the way I did that was a very low carb diet. Now, then I thought, okay, low carbs is the answer. I'll get jacked eating low carb. I'll just eat more. And then for a long time, much longer than I would care to admit, I sort of spun my wheels wondering, why aren't I massive yet? So there we go. There's a few random thoughts all coming in together, but give a bit of background of my what's fed into my approach, I suppose.
So there's a thought in there that reminds me of a young client I have, and I'm sure you've come across this too. And maybe some of the listeners have had clients this way. We sometimes get clients who have a very strong emotional attachment to leanness, but yet they're actually not particularly big yet. So I have a young client, great young man, very intelligent, but he's got a very, very reactionary, emotional, almost an objection, like subconscious objection to increasing food intake to put on muscle mass, despite the fact that outwardly he does want to put on muscle mass, because there's a fear of gaining body fat. So you're smiling and nodding like you know this one, right? And
Yeah.
me personally, a little bit about my background. I don't have this fear, but I've worked with a lot of people who do. So you're going to hate me when I say this, but when I got really serious about the gym and finally like focused on it, I went from 170 pounds to 210 pounds, pretty lean, and that's natural at the time, at 24 years of age in 7 months, right? I'm one of those people that, I pick up weights, I eat a little bit, and guess what? The muscle goes on, right? I walk around at about 255, 260 these days at I'll be 43 tomorrow. So that part hasn't been too difficult for me. But at the same time, I know the consistency and the amount of food that goes into it. So it's not to say it was easy, but a lot of other people, putting on the muscle mass is challenging, but they have got this inborn fear of gaining any fat. And then once they imagine they put on a little bit of fat as they start to eat more, whoop, back comes dieting, back comes cutting. So how do you deal with that?
Okay, so I'm nodding along because that is basically one of the major things with my online clients, the niche that I work with. It's very, very common. So there's a few different thoughts that, as you were talking about that, describing that, came to mind. So I'm fairly blunt with them. Trying to stay ripped year round is a great way to make no progress. So I just put it out there, and I understand that if this message isn't something they're prepared to take on board, and obviously with a slightly more subtle and encouraging bit of work from me, if they're still not prepared to do that, maybe it's better to go, okay, well, I can't work with you right now. From their point of view, they might think, you're encouraging me to accept a little bit of fat gain, and I'm not prepared to do that. Well, if they're psychologically not there, then the whole process should improve your life, right? It shouldn't ruin you, and you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. And that's cool. If you want to stay shredded, then I just make sure they understand. Okay, you can be shredded, but you're not going to recomp your way to being a massive 160 pounds. Like, that just doesn't happen. You can't be to like negative body fat and 160 or something and look incredibly good. You're going to have to push the scale weight up. So I'm fairly transparent. Your weight is going to have to climb. I talk about the rate of gain in terms of what I think is realistic. And I set parameters going, look, if you're going quicker than this, there is a risk of excessive fat loss. We're going to tolerate fat gain. We're going to tolerate some because it's part of the process when you're in a surplus, and that's what you need to grow. We will control it. We'll try to maximize muscle gain and minimize fat gain. The great news is, and especially for people like this, like you're going to diet and basically the fat falls off. Like, it's one of the few benefits to me. My wife hates me again for this, but she's like, if I get sick or something, it's like, oh, Tom didn't eat for a day. Oh, look, he's ripped. And that is of course an exaggeration, but use that to your advantage. And this is something I learned, gradually. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, anybody who's worked with younger men, and honestly, I'll even graduate younger, even up into like kind of the early mid 40s sometimes. But I've had guys who, they got a little bit of a belly or whatever, they come in working out. And I can usually say to them, listen, if you are reasonably good with your nutrition, if you're reasonably consistent in the gym, the fat's got to fall off of you. And it almost invariably is true. It's unfair to any other demographics. And Lord knows if we have, perimenopausal women training, they know that's a very challenging demographic to work with. Absolutely. It is flat out unfair. But yes, when you are working with these guys, like any fears I have about getting lean, unless they're doing something astonishingly weird with their nutrition, or there's something very, very odd going on hormonally, just fat that does tend to fall off of, what I would qualify as younger guys.
Absolutely. So the point again that came to mind there, Eric Helms, who I'm fairly certain you're familiar with, he's on record as talking about 4 weeks of mass gaining and building equates to about 1 week of dieting, right? Now, what I would say in my experience with these kind of guys, it's like a 5-to-1 ratio, and I tell them this is the golden ratio for you. So put it this way: if I get you to be in a surplus and gain at an appropriate rate for 20 weeks, I reckon in only 4 weeks you'll be back as lean, if not leaner, than you were at the outset, but you will also be considerably bigger. And it's all about delaying instant gratification. It's a little bit different, but skinny guys need to delay instant gratification too. For a lot of people that struggle with keeping their weight in check and avoiding fat gain, that instant gratification is avoiding the cookie, not having that slice of pizza when, you know, they know that's going to push them over the edge, not like never having that sort of thing, but just, having too fast a pie arm, as one of my clients once described it when he was struggling, just immediately reaching for that food that tastes amazing, but they know is not congruent with their goals. Well, for skinny guys, you have to delay the instant gratification of being able to lift your shirt up and see your abs for a little while. And you know what? In the UK, you only get about 6 weeks when you can show anyone your abs anyway. The weather's terrible here. It's grey most of the year. So I explained that we all have our challenges, and yours, most people would kill to be like, I can't gain weight. I get ripped really easy. I mean, I know it's a problem I have, but no one has any sympathy, because most people would love that. Now, as in my shoes, I'm like, I wish I was like Andrew and I just picked up a weight and I gained muscle. I mean, that would be amazing. However, there's plenty of people that wish they could lose weight. So you're going to gain for 20 weeks. All I need out of you is 4 weeks of dietary discipline. And guess what? You'll be lean again. You may well be, 8, 9, 10 pounds heavier than you were at the outset. Surely it's worth it, because the alternative is you spend 20 weeks trying to stay lean and you're about a pound heavier if you're lucky. Like, nothing happens. Sometimes they have to do it the way they want to do it to realize, this isn't working. And then, it's one of those things. Like I said earlier, I learned through trial and error. I tried the myth of lean gains. I'm going to gain incredibly slowly. It's only going to be lean. I'm going to pack on size eventually and look incredible. Nothing happens. Your body needs a robust signal from both your training and your diet to force your weight up or down. So you need a significant deficit to lose fat and a significant surplus to gain muscle. It doesn't mean you're getting fat and sloppy, but you will need a surplus.
And there's a couple of things in there too, is I've noticed over time, because I don't specialize in, young guys who want to put on muscle mass, but across 10 years, I've dealt with a fair number of them. And almost invariably, they just don't have a lot of appetite. That's a big driver. Mm-hmm. There's a genetic component for sure. And I don't like thinking in terms of ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph. In fact, when I see that whipped around, I mean, they can be used as ways of categorizing people, just to say, okay, that's a skinny guy. That's a guy who's naturally more lean, athletic. And this person probably has an easier time putting on body fat. But there's very little science to support the concept of the differences between ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. And if I see that in a book, there's a book I read a while back. It was Roar by Stacy Sims. And it's actually funny. So I put up a post recently highlighting a bunch of people in nutrition that I thought, these are people you want to follow. Your Lane Nortons are on there, your Sohee Lees, Martin McDonald, who's huge in the Danny Lennon, right? And this account that clearly was linked to Dr. Stacy Sims comes in, and instead of acknowledging anything about the post, you need to add Dr. Stacy Sims to this as well, right? And then within minutes, Stacy Sims' own account comes in and says, thank you so very much, which tells me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I've read Roar. There are mistakes. There's like nutrition misinformation. There's training misinformation there. I cannot recommend this at all, right? Anyway, so this attempt on their part kind of backfired, because I couldn't recommend this. And one of the red flags for me was just talking about ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph as if it were scientific fact versus just a conceptual model.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But either way, off track there a little bit. The skinny guys, they think, I'm eating more. They're not eating shit. You're not eating anything. They eat like birds.
Yes.
So it becomes tolerating eating a lot more food. And I think for me, in the phases where I've been putting on muscle most aggressively, or certainly over the years, I eat a lot. I have a fairly robust appetite. I've always had a fairly robust appetite. And therefore I've gradually over the years put on lean muscle mass, or maintained and stayed very, very stable. And, and a lot of that's tied to appetite as much as it is to genetics.
Yeah. So the most hard gainers, like the quote unquote, and this was myself as well, were behavioral hard gainers. Okay. So, sure, we don't have stellar genetics, but we are our own worst enemy in many respects, because it's our behaviors that hold us back. As I said earlier, training creates the stimulus, but you don't get big lifting weights, you get big recovering from lifting weights. And a big element of that is putting the nutrition in. So our appetite gets in our way, and absolutely there's a some underlying mechanisms why your appetite might be low. But much like someone who's dieting has to sometimes refrain from food and go with hunger, you're going to have to eat when you feel a little bit full. I mean, it's first world problems, man. Like, oh no, I want you to eat a bit more when you're already a bit stuffed. Like, get over it. It's one of those things. It's not that big of a deal. But by the same token, there's plenty of strategies to make that life a little bit easier for you to get those calories in. And I was actually on someone else's podcast on earlier this week, maybe Tuesday, and they were asking about exactly that. And much like progressive overload, you can, if you train intelligently, you can get stronger over time. I believe progressive overload applies in the kitchen, and you can train your appetite. So don't try and make the mistake I made of ripping out the bodybuilder's diet from one of the muscle mags who's a 300-pound drug taking bodybuilder who's had 15 years of experience, when you're 160 pounds and you're in your first year of training, and try and copy that, but bridge the gap over years perhaps between what you're eating and the template that's there, and somewhere along that journey is what you're going to need. So again, it's about not expecting to be perfect tomorrow. It's make the right steps in the right direction and gradually eating more, and you can train your appetite up. There's other simple strategies like drinking some calories, and eat first, drink second is one that works well for a lot of my clients. They have a shake made up, like some protein powder, peanut butter, banana, and a handful of spinach blended up. But they eat their meal, and when they're at the point they think, I can't eat anymore, everyone always has space for some liquid, right? They can drink, it's not a problem. And they get those extra nutrients in, and they hit their calorie targets. And that's the key thing. The other thing is eating enough consistently. So I would, in the past, eat loads one day, like genuinely loads. But guess what? The next day I suddenly was, I didn't have lunch until, I didn't have breakfast until, lunchtime type thing. And this is a concept, again, I think it's important with fat loss. Say your weekly average, and a week's only because we organize things in 7-day units of time, as it were. But if you're in a deficit across that week, you will lose fat, and you will move towards your goals. Like with muscle mass, I think it's not quite so simple. You can't just be in a surplus across the course of 7 days because you had a massive day on one day and you're slightly under all the others, but it still put you in that surplus, because your body can only sort of synthesize so much tissue on a per day basis, as it were. And so you kind of need to make sure you maximize muscle protein synthesis 7 days out of 7, or certainly as many of those days as possible. And the closer you come to 7 days out of 7, the better your results will be with muscle gain.
And the difference is because of we don't have a pool or reservoir of protein outside of our muscles. Our muscles are our reservoir of protein outside of the amino acids in our bloodstream, which is a very limited amount. Whereas with body fat, we have body fat. So you're absolutely right. You need to provide, in order to optimally grow. I mean, I think some of the research points to maybe an average of 4 evenly spaced, servings of protein. I mean, I think 5 is probably a good idea for a lot of people, but something like 4 evenly spaced servings of protein across a day. And then you got to do that every single day. You can't have, like you said, a day off. In a way, it is similar to the weight loss problem. It's, the guy who struggles to eat a lot of food thinks, okay, I'm doing good one day. They slack off the next day because they're full. Okay. But alternating between that is going to leave massive progress on the table. It's the same philosophy as a person who thinks, well, I ate really well, like 4 days or 5 days a week. Therefore, the weekend's a free for all. It's like, should be making progress at a 5-2 ratio. No. We know different. That weekend is wiping out all your progress during the week because you went way overboard.
Yeah, well, absolutely agree. And people have, how much sympathy do you have for someone who diets well Monday to Friday, but then blows it out on the weekend? Most people are like, well, it's fairly obvious where you're going wrong. The same thing applies the other way. For gaining mass, you need to tick the boxes, every day of the week to put yourself in the best position. And I think, except if you're someone who struggles to do this, but you really desperately want to achieve it, you're going to have to tick those boxes more times out of 100 than someone else will, and for longer. But you will get there eventually. I think that's the other thing is some people respond really quickly, and then they kind of plateau and their rate of gain slow down. Now that may be because they never had to think about how they can vary their training, or they push their nutrition practice because they got those fast, easy gains and they were lazy. Or it could just be some people gain fast and then it plateaus, where other people, it's that they're a slow burner, but they can reach the same end point. if they stay with it and trust the process and do the right things. So I think I tell all of my guys, like, I'm certain you can get where you want to go once we've defined what their goals are. Most of them don't tell me they want to look like Ronnie Coleman. They kind of want to look like a men's health cover model, right? Now, that is achievable for most people, certainly with the guys who are on the cover over here at the moment, if they're prepared to do the hard yards. And then you also point out, like, look, they've prepped for that shoot, it's nice lighting, they've got a tan, blah, blah, blah. They probably don't even look like that day to day themselves, but you can have a physique resembling that if you trust the process and are patient with this. But again, it's that quick fix thing. It's not going to happen. I think one of the other things is managing expectations. People think, 12 weeks, I can suddenly be, huge and ripped. It doesn't happen like that, I'm afraid.
And something else that I should point out here too, because we framed this conversation in the context of training men, but this stuff applies very equally to women. Stereotypically, I think a lot of coaches think, well, more women on average, are focused on fat loss. Well, guess what? Lots of guys are focused on fat loss too. But there is an emerging trend where more and more women value and feel great about, putting on more muscle. And women often have this perception that it's more challenging to build muscle mass. And there's some truth and some myth in that. I mean, I have this quote that T Nation has memed and gets passed around every once in a while about how, the women and bulky myth, right? And there's a whole bunch of stuff to that, but there's always somebody who kind of pushes back and they complains about the whole idea of the word bulky. They want the word bulky to go away. Well, my first thought is this is the language the population uses. So we kind of need to address the fear that's keeping women out of the gym, that's keeping them afraid to lift weights. Let's start there. That's where the greatest good is. Like, forget this PC bullshit. I'm not interested in playing that game with these people. But there are also a lot of women who they're either like, I want to be bulky, I want to be muscular, I want to be ripped. And the rules still apply. I think, if anything, it can be a little bit more challenging for women, but women actually can put on muscle mass really, really effectively if they train hard.
Yes.
They can do a volume in a gym that will kill most men. They're physiologically, women can and should train higher volumes. They recover faster than men on average. And any coach who's worked with women who want to train hard and put on muscle mass and get stronger, it is fun to wind these women up and let them go, because they can do cool shit at the gym.
Yes, yeah. It's very eye-opening. In fact, so two points. You're right about more women being interested in gaining muscle mass. Certainly, I gave credit. So I put all this information about if you struggle to build muscle, and I'm expecting to get guys age 18 to 35, for example, coming to me, and I do. But the amount of women that reach out and okay, I found that really helpful, thank you, or I'm interested in working with you, it was surprising to me. So there's definitely interest out there, and some of the hardest training people I've ever met are women. Just never go set for set with a woman in a workout, because they're like, their capacity to recover, go again and maintain a high level of output. Like, I could do another set at the same time as them, but I'd be doing significantly less weight and way fewer reps than I was at the start. It is phenomenal. And as you say, inspiring to see. And I think there's this, as you say, myth that they can't build muscle and they can't gain strength. Upper body strength, in my experience, is harder for them compared to men, but lower body strength, like, they are phenomenal when you, as you say, when you get them motivated and inspired to do this, and they work their ass off, like, they can do incredible things. And it's quite funny to watch when you have a woman, like, I know, deadlifting what some of the guys can't do, and just see the double take from the guys as they walk past, like, hang on a minute, did she just lift that? So yes, and actually there is research supporting that they can gain muscle borderline as effectively as men in terms of as a rate, but on a relative basis. So they start with a smaller frame, so the absolute change in weight and muscle mass is smaller, but the relative change is pretty similar.
And that's a fact. Absolutely. Yep. I've seen that same sort of research, and it's almost flies in the face of what seems like conventional logic. But in this particular case, women still have to work really, really hard, just as men have to work really, really hard in the gym. I mean, how many guys do we see banging out presses and curls all the time? They're still skinny. It goes back to our original conversation. And so I still tell women, like, what on earth makes you think you are going to have these bachelor girls smell the weights, eat a chicken breast, do some shrugs, and all of a sudden you got pro bodybuilder traps? It doesn't work that way. So it's
Yes.
still very, very safe for women to go and attack the weights, go hard in the gym. And they're, unless they were really seeking to put on a lot of lean muscle mass, they're never going to look bulky.
Yeah, I have it with in consultations with people, women, but guys too say the same to me. Like, I don't want to get too big, and you just I just laugh. Like, I'm like, look, I've been trying to get too big most of my lifting career. Sadly, I have no one's ever accused me of that. I have not achieved that much as I wanted to. You are unlikely to be the 0.01% of the population that will get too big just from looking at weights. And you know what? If if you happen to be that person, don't worry, because you'll look incredible after a few weeks of training, and you'll be able to maintain it very easily. It's a nice problem to have. But yes, there is this perception that's still out there, which is a shame, really, because it just isn't realistic. That I'm going to walk over to the free weight area, pick up a weight, and suddenly, look like a pro bodybuilder or something.
And it's rooted in that. It's rooted in the images of the old school female pro bodybuilders, which, I mean, Christ, I mean, Jesus, they're using drugs. I mean, it's not even like, oh, all natural. You get pro, like IFBB pro men's bodybuilders to 80s saying, oh, all natural, bro. Muscle tech is all you need. Come on, we know better than this. They just can't say it, right? So
yeah,
images of these women, you're not going to look like that. And it's further perpetuated by a recent generation of, honestly, sometimes it's bikini competitors. Like a lot of the local bikini competitors, certainly a lot of the other classes in the untested federations, there is some help there. And so if you're seeing images of some of these women that have a lot of muscle on, understand that they probably are using something extra. And that's not an indictment of those people. I don't care what someone's doing. And really, should we care what someone's doing? Is that person natural? Fuck no, don't care. But in the single context of female competitors who are perpetuating the idea they're using drugs, but outwardly claiming they're natural, there is harm in that. So I'm a little harder on them. And I'll say it out loud, like your Dana Lynn Bailey's. I maybe someone's a fan of Dana Lynn and her media, but I take a very dim view on the ones that are screaming to high heaven that they're natural, and they're obviously not, given their accomplishments and their appearance. What they've achieved is simply not a natural state of being. And they're telling a lot of young women. And on one hand, I know there are more women who would be like, hey, I want to look like DLB. Okay, cool, awesome. Or people in that world. And if it inspires them to train hard, great. But unfortunately, there's when have you ever seen a guy who's like, Arnold's all natural? We know he's not, but wow, cool, I could do that. Awesome. And they go to the gym. Like, you've never heard of a guy going, oh man, I don't want to look like that. Like, if you don't want to look like Arnold, I don't know what, I don't have an answer for it. But far more women than not don't want to look like Dana Lynn Bailey. And so there is a double standard. And therefore, I think it is important that we are at least a little bit more out there about that message, so that way the women who are being deterred from doing the single greatest thing it could ever they do for themselves, for the physical and mental health, which is to strength train, that it is not a barrier or a deterrent to them stepping foot into a gym, especially now with, well, look what happened the last year. And fitness pros have been screamed down for saying, because it's not politically correct to say it, and there's a way to say it and a way not to, but like your physical health and obesity and other things related to obesity are causing worse COVID outcomes. So maybe one of the answers going forward, because God forbid this ever happens again in our society, then we're going to have a better outcome if we have a healthier population. Now, how to go about that, boy, that's a big challenge, and we're on the forefront of it. We need to do a better job, but the answer isn't locking the gyms down and shutting people in their homes either.
No. So I completely agree. I think so. Firstly, hopefully one of the major from the fallout of this whole pandemic is people value their health and fitness to a much greater degree. Those that previously took it for granted, hopefully now have had a bit of wake up call, and that the messaging from our governments and things like that and the media, the wider media, not just fitness professionals, is more positive. Sadly, I have little faith in them delivering on that, but it'd be great if that was the case. So on that point, absolutely. And then the second point about the use, particularly in female physique, I would love for there to be more transparency. I think women are very naive in terms of the use of anabolic steroids or any kind of performance enhancing drugs. They, as you said, they probably just assume these girls, they train hard and eat right and they look incredible. I would also say there's quite a lot of naivety in most men about, what they can look like naturally, and what I've had people who are like talking about someone going like that I want to look like that guy. And I'm like, okay, well, he's made some decisions. You're gonna, in time, you might have to consider some certain things to, if you really want to look like that guy. Okay. And they're like, oh no way, he's on that. He says it. And I'm like, okay, I mean that's nice, but you realize he just can't cut. I mean, well, actually, a great thing is a handful of people who now are really transparent and open about it, and I am all in favor. I think that's phenomenal to be the person that comes out and goes, what, like, yes, I'm using X, Y, and Z. Be completely open about that, because I think that has incredible value for the wider audience. The fact that that message will gradually percolate out to people. Because another thing that is a big issue with the people I see is like changing your physique is an incredibly emotional process. If you're someone who's being bullied for being skinny, it's incredibly emotionally charged, and you want desperately to achieve that, but you have no concept of the use that is going on to achieve that. They then they get harder, and they're down on themselves even more, because comparison is the thief of joy, and they feel like a failure because I don't look like this. When you're like, well, okay, like this guy's got some advantages over you, and that's a really important conversation I've had with a few people, and I think it's really helped them when they realize, okay, I'm not, like, they genuinely think they're a failure because they haven't packed on 50 pounds of muscle in their first year of training. It's like, no, you're doing great. You're 17 pounds up and we're 11 months in. Like, that's fantastic. Keep going, type thing. But they're actually looking hard, like thinking it's all pointless and worthless and down on themselves.
That's pretty common, whether it's, men want to put on muscle, anyone wanting to lose fat. It's never quite quick enough. And they're always, comparing themselves to unattainable ideals often enough. And what you follow on social media. And if I have a client who I get a hint of, I've worked with clients who are world class in terms of just like how they walk around anyway, some great genetics, great hard work. And yet there's a comparison to, they cherry pick people who in their mind are perfect. It's like, holy sweet mother of God. First of all, you need to look around at the rest, go out in Costco sometime, or, and just look around at the average person. And that's not to denigrate the average person, but, understand that what you've achieved is phenomenal and you look amazing. You work really hard for it, but, and not to zero in on that one person whose image is like, oh, I wish I could look like that. It's funny you mentioned, the people who are transparent. And this is more of a joke, but it's partially serious. If I get someone who's kind of out there and transparent of what they're using, then I'm wondering, well, that's what they're telling us. Rich Piana, if anyone knows who Rich Piana was, God rest his soul, he's an interesting personality to say the least. And Piana, of course, was open about, various elements of drug use. But if you look at Piana's physique, it's like, there's way more going on there with that dude. If anyone doesn't know who Rich Piana is, go Google Rich, and then come back and message me and go like, what the hell? I mean, Rich is an interesting looking character for sure. And there was definitely some real wild party lifestyle stuff that I think eventually killed him, but entertaining to say the least. But either way, we'll move on from that. Something else I wanted to catch before I run out of time here is your thoughts on longevity in the fitness industry. Maybe some of your own personal wisdoms as to how you've had such an enduring career, and how what you would say to coaches who want to endure in this stuff, maybe finding it challenging, some advice for longevity.
Okay, so this is from a coach's being lengthening their career as a coach. So I think having like a white belt mentality is a really good one. Like always being open to learn, and never think you've made it and that you know all the answers. The human body is incredibly complex, and you can't possibly know everything about it. So constantly searching to improve upon your methods and your knowledge base is obviously fantastic. And then finding a passion. So mine is helping guys build muscle. Now that's great because they muscle look pretty and they feel good, but really it's genuinely rewarding when you see like someone transform, not just physically, but mentally, and like how much more confident they are. And, like, again, from personal experience, like I would walk into a room and like, if it was a busy room, I'd like look down at the floor and I'd just hide in the corner. Now it's not like I go in all guns blazing, I'm shouting the roof down, but I'm certainly more confident. And part of that has come from the physical change, and also knowing that if I put the work in, I can achieve this. So if I put the work in to be more social and start a conversation with something, there are rewards to be had there. So finding your passion, so that may be helping perimenopausal, it's easy for me to say, perimenopausal women to navigate that period of their life and get them the most out of it. I interviewed for Breaking Muscle Amanda Thebe, who's written a book, Menopocalypse, and I read that and actually recently reviewed it, and like, a fantastic read. But her passion for it comes across. She's been through it, she's lived through it, she knows it, she's researched it, and now she's helping loads of people. So I think if you are genuinely passionate about helping, whatever that may be, that will help, because then you are motivated to get up, to get better, and to keep doing what you're doing. One of the things that really drives me nuts is people that get their first qualification and then and they never do anything. They never try and further themselves. So that self-development, whether it be reading Cal Newport style books or physiology books or whatever, try and just to be a little bit better every day. In that respect, I think is one. Once you have worked out what your niche or who you like working with, and that doesn't mean you have to work with very specific demographic in terms of things. Like my in-person clients were limited by distance, right? People only travel so far, but what I work with is people that I get on with and they put effort in. And I'm happy to work with almost anyone in person if they're prepared to put the effort in and work hard and do what's required to improve. It's not that they have to be a muscle building target. So I work with a wide variety of people early in my career, and then you just narrow down, these are the type of people and that I really like working with. And once you enjoy working with people, it doesn't really feel like going to work. So then that helps with longevity.
I like the point about niching, especially. I personally have never really, found myself in a very narrow niche. As I said earlier, I tend to work with the general population, men and women. Age ranges from some young athletes, but I definitely wouldn't want to specialize in all young athletes. And then, some older adults. My client Larry is always featured prominently on my social media. Everybody loves Larry. 70-year-old beast. He's got this Santa thing going on, yet he's just super strong. But there are people in our world that I love talking to, good friends of mine. I always think of Robert Linkle, who they didn't start out in the niche that they're in. The niche sort of found them along the way. Robert's talked to me about that before. And Robert is one of the world's best trainers when it comes to training older adults. And so he's got some coursework on that stuff. And if anyone isn't familiar with Robert, he doesn't have necessarily a big social media like you do. You've built quite a big one. But Robert quietly serves the people that he loves working with, and coaches who find him and plug into his stuff get a lot out of it. Or I think of Pete Dupuis, and I have had this conversation a few times, Cressy Sports Performance, how their early origins, they didn't decide, hey, we want to be the guys who train major and minor league baseball pitchers. That was a niche that found them early. They doubled down on it, and they're the world's best at it. So sometimes coaches, mentors will say, oh, you need to find your niche. I mean, a trainer who's 6 months to a year and a half in the industry doesn't need to find a fucking niche. You need to find a lot of experience. You need to work with a broad array of people, get really damn good at your craft. And along the way, maybe a niche will emerge to where you find a certain type of client you really love working with, or you end up with a type of client who just keeps sending you more and more and more of this type of a client. And you realize, wait a second, this is a great community to work within. Using the older adult example again, this is a demographic that on average has the financial resources and probably a little bit more of a sense of urgency to want to make sure they're staying healthy. So, if you get older adults in your training, I mean, the ones that I have, they tend to be very, very built in long-term lifestyle clients, are very dependable. They take it very seriously. Whereas, you probably have, at least a certain proportion of the young men that you train and want to put on muscle mass, they can be a little bit more transient. I'm sure you build in a lot of, long-term relationships, but I'm guessing that population on an average, they want to learn the skills, put on a bit of muscle, and they may not necessarily have the financial resources to endure the way a retiree would.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yes. So I agree with those points. And yet, so I train, from like an 18-year-old guy up to a 76-year-old guy, and there's men and women, and and all the way through that age range. And the people that I have trained for the longest, well, I suppose it's slightly obvious they'd be the oldest, but those people in their 70s, 60s, 50s are clients that I have had for, some of them like 15 years. So I've had that in-person relationship with them. And of course, one of the things is that they can afford to pay me to see me 3-4 times a week, whereas most 18-year-olds aren't in that fortunate position. Most of the younger guys, they're online clients because it's a lower barrier to entry cost-wise, they get the tools and the accountability and the program design, but it's like a crash course for them in many respects. Right, okay, if I work with you for 3 to 6 months, I'll get a lot of these principles. I invest some money, but I then can go out and apply these myself and continue to progress and put that into practice. And that suits my finances. Quickly on just on the niche thing, I think in person, you really don't need to laser in on a niche. Online, you need to go on a niche.
I actually believe that absolutely. I think that doesn't default to my thinking, because I don't really work hard on my online side of my business. I have a small online business. I definitely don't advertise it. Every once in a while, someone pops up having read a T-Nation article and it's like, hey, can you talk about training online? I'm like, all right, cool, sure. I have a very busy in-person business, and I think you're 100% right. The online, in order to stand out, if anyone goes to your profile, and we're going to make sure that people now in a second know where to find you, your marketing and your media is very geared towards that niche. Now, as niches go, I don't think it's a particularly narrow one, which in of itself is quite brilliant, because it's broad enough to attract a large array of mostly men, it's certainly in the online space. But I'm guessing you mentioned a couple of times that you actually do train women. I'm guessing your female clients are probably more in person on average.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Cool. No, so that's a perfect illustration. And I've seen this before, and you're absolutely right. You can definitely have two different, almost brands in a sense, between your online and your in-person stuff. And when you grow to the scale for online, then the in-person, it has and it always will be fed more by referral business than it necessarily will be your online. Your online brand and media is definitely one of the major things that fuels online coaching businesses.
Yeah. I mean, referrals are the best way to generate businesses in either version, but they are far more likely to come in person. And the person is then sold on you before they even come to meet you, because they've had third-party endorsement from someone they trust. So yes, absolutely. And you're right. The people I train in person, men and women, much more sort of as a percentage, far more women, whereas online I have a handful of female clients, but they are the exception.
Awesome. Well, let's tell people where to find you online.
Pretty easy, except for, hang on a minute, we've been your cat, what's that is a monster.
Yeah, Aussie. So
Aussie
just kick her out. So I've scooped him up for, obviously everybody listening can't see him.
Much more interesting talking about cats than finding out where you can follow me on Instagram or whatever. But we have a cat, Bella. We got her. She's just over 6 months old now, so nowhere near that size.
Well, just think about it. I mean, again, I'm 6'2" and 255 pounds, and so everybody listening doesn't quite get this. Although if you go and see Aussie on my profile, you'll sometimes see him. But I mean, like, I've got him up on my arms, and he's like the entire breadth of my upper body. So he's a big fluffy dude.
You didn't need to get any weights for the home gym. Just lift Aussie a bit. It's heavy enough. He reminds me of like when I had a cat called Emily when I was a kid, like that kind of size, like big fluff ball, big old cat. There we go. That Bella needs to start making some gains. She's a behavioral hard gainer. I'll start feeding her up.
Whereas this guy has no trouble with appetite whatsoever, so I have to ration out his food. So we Aussie interrupted. Where to find you?
Me. Yes. So pretty easy. Once you can spell my name, that is. So tommaccormick.com. All of the links are on there, or the social media I'm most active on is Instagram, and I am just at Tom MacCormick there.
And it's MacCormick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct. It's a tricky one. MacCormick. But there's an A and then two C's, which throws people off. And then it's one people struggle with. Hardly anyone's ever spelt it right first time. But yeah, mess around with that. Experiment with Googling that. You'll find me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate you taking the time. It's always fun to get to chat a little bit more like this versus just the messages on social media. And for everybody listening, thank you again for being loyal and consistent. I still have to work up some schedule stuff for the next few weeks. My hope is that everything will go according to plan. And again, I apologize for the disruption that I had recently. And Tom, thank you so much. Please, guys, go follow Tom. Check out what he's doing, especially if you're a younger guy who wants to put on muscle. But honestly, I hope everybody listening got a lot out of that. And stay tuned, and I should be with you next week.